The first time they showed up, it wasn't fireworks or some grand arrival. No death beam slicing through clouds, no mothership hovering over the Statue of Liberty like in those old movies. Nah, they just appeared. Quiet, polished, clean suits, thin smiles, and a message. We come in peace. We offer protection. I remember watching it all unfold on a cracked TV at Murphy's Bar. Sound was low, but the subtitles were enough. The alien's face looked vaguely human, eyes a little too large, skin like faded marble. His voice was smooth, like a politician who'd practiced in front of a mirror too long. They called themselves the Varelians, said they'd been watching Earth for centuries, studying us, learning, claiming they wanted to help now because we were entering a critical phase of self-destruction. Nukes, pollution, wars, greed, all the usual sins they liked to toss in our face like we didn't already know. I remember how everyone around me looked, hopeful, dumbstruck, maybe a little relieved, like a beaten dog finally seeing a hand that didn't hold a stick. But not me. I just sipped my warm beer and laughed. "Really?" I muttered, loud enough for old Danny to hear. He glanced at me, wiping a glass, eyebrows raised. "Come again?" "These bastards," I said, nodding at the screen. "Think we need protecting." Danny squinted at the screen like he was trying to understand it all. "Well, maybe we do." "From what?" I snapped. "Ourselves?" He didn't answer. Just went back to wiping the same damn glass he'd probably wiped for 20 years. I guess that's the thing. Most people don't realize how much strength they got until someone steps in and tries to take the wheel. That's what the Varelians were doing. Smiling while cutting your food for you like you're some invalid. The UN jumped at it, signed some unified peace accord faster than a dog chasing scraps. Governments bent the knee, smiling through gritted teeth. Media blasted it 24/7. A new era, they called it. Peace guaranteed. They handed over satellite networks, surveillance control, even military coordination. All in the name of global harmony. Translation? They wanted leash access to every corner of the planet, and humans? We took it. Smiled, nodded, laughed. But we were watching. Men like me. We were waiting. I wasn't a general, not even ex-military. I drove trucks across state lines for a decade, did a couple tours in the sandbox before that, and kept my head low. But I knew people. People who remembered what it felt like to fight. Not for politics or medals, but for freedom. That raw, feral kind. My brother-in-law, Frank, was one of them. He ran a junkyard outside Kansas City, but he had enough parts buried out back to rebuild a Cold War museum. We started gathering, quietly, no posters, no speeches, just conversations in garages, over beers, behind locked barn doors. Call it paranoia. Call it instinct. Because not even a year after the Varelians blessed us with their protection, the cracks showed. Curfews, surveillance optimization, banned literature, religions started disappearing. Firearms? Forget it. They didn't take them, just made ammo near impossible to get. Blackouts started. Cities turned gray. Drones hovered over fields like vultures. And the worst part? Most people still didn't see it. They called it progress. They called it the future. We called it what it was, occupation without bullets. The Varelians didn't need to invade with force. They gave us a leash and watched us clip it around our own necks. But see, they underestimated one thing. Humans aren't fragile because we bleed. We're dangerous because we do. That's why when Frank called me one night, voice low, saying, "It's time," I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my boots, dusted off the old chest under my floorboards, and drove west. I hit the highway around midnight, the sky above empty except for the soft glow of orbiting Varelian patrol lights. They looked like stars at first, still blinking slow, but if you watched long enough, you'd see the difference. Stars don't move in patterns. Stars don't track you. I drove with the lights off most of the way, half out of habit, half out of paranoia. My truck still had an old diesel block and a scrambled tag that read like a dead registration. No GPS, no satellite ping, just me, the wheel, and an old hunting rifle wrapped in tarp in the back seat. Frank's place sat past a stretch of broken farmland, just where the city lights started dying out. It used to be surrounded by cornfields, but most of that had gone to seed. These days it looked more like a scrapyard married a graveyard and had ugly kids. Rusted metal bones stuck out of the earth like it had been bombed, stripped clean, and forgotten. He met me at the edge of the property. Flashlight blinked twice. "No tails?" he asked. "Not unless they're cloaked," I said, shutting the door quiet. Frank nodded. His beard was longer now and he'd gotten thinner. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 2. Life under Varelian rule did that. It drained the color out of everything. He motioned toward the old barn. "They're all here. About 20. 20? I raised an eyebrow. "That's it?" He didn't smile. "It's not about numbers anymore. It's about who's ready to bleed." We walked inside, the smell of oil and dust thick in the air. The walls were lined with shelves stacked with scavenged tech, circuit boards, radio parts, welding tools, and scrap metal piled like they meant something, and they did. These weren't just machines. These were pieces of memory, human memory. Before we handed over our teeth. The others turned as I walked in, men mostly, late 30s to early 50s, hard faces and calloused hands. There was a quiet nod exchanged between us all, like we'd been in the same war even if we hadn't. I saw 2 women too, not the TikTok kind, the real kind. Sharp-eyed, no bullshit. They didn't flinch when someone cocked a homemade shotgun behind them. Frank cleared his throat. "This is Connor. He fought in Fallujah, drove rigs during the collapse. He's seen what's coming." I didn't correct him. Didn't need to. Frank continued, pulling a tarp off a crate in the center of the room. Inside sat what looked like a portable reactor, except it wasn't just a battery. It was something else, something alien. "This was pulled from one of their drone cores," he said. "Bastard dropped out of the sky last month near Denver. We picked the wreck clean before the retrieval team showed up." A younger guy in the back whistled low. "Ain't that a death sentence?" Frank grunted. "Only if you get caught." He passed me the data slate. I scrolled through the readings. Varelian tech, compact power cell with layered encryption. Could run a city block or cook a small town if ruptured. "Planning to blow it?" I asked. "No. Plan's bigger." Frank took me around the corner to what looked like a war room. Maps tacked to plywood. Digital overlays projected from a modded Varelian lens hacked into some old Dell hardware. We were looking at Earth, but not the Earth you see on a postcard. This one was color-coded and gridded. Red zones, gray zones, dead zones. "They're soft controlling us," he said. "Not with bullets, with dependency. Food shipments are routed through orbital silos. Power's controlled by SkyGrid. Every hospital runs on alien diagnostics now. You take away their tech, and half the world's on life support." I stared at the map. "So what's the move?" He pointed to a location marked in bold yellow. Grid Nexus Aero 7, southeast Wyoming. Not a city, not even a base, but every drone, satellite, and digital lock reports through there. We bring it down, they lose sight. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was suicidal. "You're talking about blinding a species that can wipe continents clean." Frank didn't blink. "They won't kill the herd. Not yet. They still think they can manage us. And if they're wrong," he finally smiled, Then let's give them a reason to be. We spent the next 2 weeks prepping in silence. Daytime was for blending in, working odd jobs, staying off public radar, using burner IDs. At night, we trained. Not military drills. That was the past. This was civil resistance, learning how to move invisible, how to jam frequencies without lighting up sensors, how to build bombs that didn't ping alien sniffers. I bunked in the back of Frank's old tow shop, slept on a cot surrounded by broken car hoods and reeking motor oil. One night, while oiling a modified slug rifle, I heard a quiet voice from behind. "You really think we can win?" I turned to see one of the women, maybe late 30s, tough jaw, burned scar across her cheek. Her name was Nadia, ex-air traffic control before the aliens shut that down and replaced it with orbital AIs. "Not about winning," I said. "It's about reminding them they picked the wrong species." She nodded. "I like that." She sat beside me and picked up a screwdriver, helping me reassemble the breach. "My kid's in one of their education domes in Dallas," she said, voice cold. "Said he wanted to be a pilot. They told him piloting was inefficient, that humans should stick to emotional labor." My hands froze. Emotional labor. That's what we'd been reduced to. Caretakers, entertainers, dependents, everything except free men. "They're training our kids to be pets," she said quietly. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. 3 nights before the operation, one of ours didn't show up. Marcus, former EMT, smart, fast, loyal, gone. We found his van 2 miles out, door wide open, no blood, just empty. Frank stared at it like a grave. "They're watching closer now." "They already know," I said. "They're just waiting for us to make the first mistake." He didn't answer. We both knew what had to happen. We couldn't delay. Next night, we mobilized. 6 trucks, 2 bikes, 4 crates of smuggled gear, and a plan held together by duct tape and desperation. Grid Nexus 07 wasn't a fortress. That was the brilliance of it. It didn't need walls because it didn't expect war. It was a massive relay station masked as a communications observatory. A hub of black glass towers and humming antenna arrays surrounded by forest and fences no taller than a farmer's field. We moved in at 3:14 a.m. No spotlights, no guards, just drones. We'd planned for those. Nadia launched a scrambler device from a hollowed-out laptop casing. It burst mid-air, spewing electromagnetic noise tuned to Varelian neural frequencies. The drones jittered, hovered, then dropped like flies. We breached the outer wall in under a minute. No alarms, not the kind we'd hear anyway. I led the charge through the northern gate, rifle ready, eyes peeled. Inside, the air felt wrong, too sterile, like we were inside the lungs of something artificial. The main tower loomed above us, humming like it was alive. We reached the core room just before 3:42. The power cell Frank had scavenged was already wired into a disruptor rig, a slow-burn overload that would fry everything in a 10-mile radius without a fireworks show. We locked it in place, set the timer. 5 minutes. That's when the first voice spoke. Not from behind us, inside us. "You misunderstand protection." It wasn't words, it was meaning, poured straight into our minds like warm poison. I clutched my head, eyes burning. Around me, others staggered too. "You threaten your own stability. We offer correction." "Not conquest." "Then let us fall," I growled. "No species falls alone." That was the last thing it said. Then came the sound, a sharp crack of dimensional air, and they appeared. Not drones, not diplomats, enforcers, 10 feet tall, armored in obsidian mesh, eyes like molten gold, hands built for unmaking. Frank was first to fire. The bullet shattered harmlessly against its chest. Then the room turned red. The room erupted before I could even breathe right. Frank's rifle clattered to the floor, barrel twisted like taffy. Whatever armor the enforcer wore didn't just block bullets, it bent the laws around them. The thing didn't move fast, it just moved deliberately, like it had all the time in the universe and no reason to hurry. The rest of us weren't so lucky. Nadia screamed, slamming a jolt grenade against the nearest wall and diving behind the main console. Sparks danced in the air, not pretty ones, just violent bursts of raw energy that set off chain reactions in every hacked panel we'd rigged on entry. One enforcer caught the edge of the blast. Recoiling slightly, enough for Benny to slide in low and fire a direct slug at its exposed joint. That hit landed. The thing staggered, its left leg giving a mechanical shudder. "Down one!" Benny shouted. That was all he got out before another enforcer, bigger than the first, grabbed him by the throat and lifted him clean off the ground. There was a snap, not the Hollywood kind, no drawn-out scream, just a dry, final crack. He dropped like a broken rag. I moved on instinct, ducked under the command console, yanked the disruptor cable, and reconnected it to manual. The timer was shot. I'd have to blow it myself. But we had a bigger problem. None of us were getting out. "Nadia," I barked, "seal the west door." She rolled over shattered glass and jammed a screwdriver into the control panel, hot wiring it with the elegance of a drunk mechanic. The steel door slammed shut, locking out one enforcer who pounded the other side like a battering ram. 3 were still inside. Frank was pinned under debris, his arm at a wrong angle and blood pouring from his scalp. One of the women, Katya, I think, dragged him back while covering his body with hers like a damn human shield. "We need an exit!" she screamed. "There isn't one!" I snapped. "We finish this here." I slid across the floor, smoke filling my lungs, and reached the core. The disruptor was humming, not stable. The power cell we stole from the drone was overloading too fast. I had maybe 30 seconds. The enforcers knew it too. One turned toward me, scanning. I could feel its focus. Not eyes, not cameras, just pressure, like standing at the edge of an execution line. But instead of attacking, it spoke. "You will destroy this station. This will cost you nothing." Its voice echoed in my skull again. Bypassing ears, cutting right into thought. I barked a laugh, coughing blood onto the floor. Funny way of begging. You achieve no victory, you end no war, you ensure no freedom. Then why are you here, talking like a priest before the slaughter? There was a pause. And in that second, I saw it. The Varelians weren't angry. They weren't even confused. They were curious. We thought humanity would accept survival. I gritted my teeth, yanked a broken lever back, and watched the overload bar surge red. "Then you never understood us at all." I hit the manual trigger. There was no explosion. No bright flash, no mushroom cloud. The disruptor let out a pulse. Low, quiet, and deep, like the earth itself exhaled from the pit of its lungs. And then everything collapsed. Lights flickered. Panels died. The enforcers twitched, as if someone had jammed a fork into the back of their skulls. One dropped mid-stride, face first into the floor. The others screamed, not with mouths, but with frequency. High, inhuman, their bodies jerked and locked up like broken machines. Then silence. One by one, they went limp. But we didn't cheer, because behind that silence came the siren. A sound that didn't belong to any Varelian tech we'd seen before. This wasn't a security alarm, it was a distress call. Frank coughed behind me. What the hell was that? I looked around. The main core was fried. But the disruptor hadn't been designed to just take out local relay signals. This was bigger. "We just screamed at the galaxy," I said quietly. "Loud and clear." Katya pulled out a comm device she'd jury-rigged from human and alien parts. The screen was glitching, but one thing was clear. Every satellite, every drone, every surveillance feed, offline. The world below was going dark, entire cities blinking out of alien sight. We'd done it. We'd blinded them. Then the whole damn building started shaking. We barely made it out alive, half dragging, half running, with fire snapping through the halls behind us. The trucks were scorched from the EMP backlash, but Frank's old bike still worked. Nadia hot-wired the backup engine, and we managed to tie a few ropes and sling Frank between us on makeshift sleds. We didn't talk much on the ride back. What could we say? We'd killed 5, lost 4, and poked a hole in the goddamn sky. But the real war was just starting, because now they knew we were capable of saying no. The days that followed were a blur of chaos. Cities went black. No drones, no updates, no orbital trade deliveries. Hospitals lost alien diagnostic feeds. Governments panicked. People woke up. Some screamed about terrorism, some cheered for liberation. Most didn't know what to do. And the Varelians? They didn't retaliate immediately. No bombs, no speeches, just absence, like they were watching, thinking, the quiet before something worse. Nadia and I held down a temporary shelter near Lakewood, inside a gutted museum that used to hold Civil War relics. Fitting. Frank was still unconscious, his body holding on by a thread. Katya ran comms from the basement, bouncing messages to resistance cells that were starting to form. Not because of us, but because the silence had finally shaken people out of their fog. The leash was gone. And now Earth was looking around like a pit bull off the chain. But there was fear, too, because nobody knew what would come next. Then, 7 days after Grid Nexus fell, they came back. Not Varelians. Humans. From orbit. An entire shuttle, old Earth tech, long abandoned, barely legal under the new peace accords, landed in the Nevada wastes. They weren't civilians. They weren't diplomats. They were men and women who'd left Earth years ago during the first wave of Varelian integration. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, ones who refused the deal and vanished into the stars, off-grid. They called themselves the Earthborn. Their leader was an old warhound named Griggs, long white beard, cybernetic left arm, and the kind of eyes that made kids shut up without being told. "You dumb bastards," he said when he first saw me. I looked him in the eye. "We woke them up." He smiled, but it wasn't joy, it was respect. "No, son. You reminded them what humans really are." He brought news, bad news. The Varelians hadn't just come to Earth. They'd done this before. 10 other species, 10 other planets. Same method. Peace, protection, slow pacification. Strip identity. Kill resistance with comfort. Turn civilizations into dependent, compliant pets. Earth was the first to snap the leash. That disruptor blast hadn't just blinded the local grid. It had sent a ripple, a challenge, and now the real Varelians were coming. Not diplomats, not enforcers, the ones who handled extinction. "They're sending Judgment-class ships," Griggs said, "not to negotiate, to erase." I clenched my fists. So what do we do? Griggs looked out at the dark horizon, the glow of distant cities slowly lighting back up without alien control. "We remind them again," he said, "that Earth doesn't go quietly. We didn't sleep much after Griggs landed. He brought tech we'd only dreamed about. Cold-forged weapons fused from deep-orbit scrap, soundless engines, field scramblers that could hide a bunker beneath a farm. But more than that, he brought truth. Hard, bitter, and worse than we'd feared. The Varelians weren't just a species, they were a process, a system wrapped in flesh and metal, designed to make civilizations vanish quietly, not with fire, with shame, with obedience, with empty comfort that rotted the spine. They came, studied, offered peace. If peace didn't work, they altered the genes, the minds, took what made you you and replaced it with calm, productive servitude. They did it to the Rakari, Griggs said, unfolding a star map. Brilliant species, artisans, gone in 2 generations. Now they paint Varelian temples with colors approved by their overseers. He tapped another blinking dot. The Gorians used to be warriors, had entire continents of living steel. Now they file reports and apologize before they speak. I leaned over the map. Why didn't anyone fight back? They did, Griggs said grimly, and the Varelians made sure no one ever remembered them. He locked eyes with me. But humans were too loud, too angry, too damn stubborn. That's why we were dangerous, not because we were smart, but because we wouldn't stop. The next move wasn't military, it was psychological. We had 3 days before the Judgment Fleet hit Earth's upper atmosphere, 3 days before the Varelians brought out whatever they'd been keeping in their galactic back pocket. Not bombs, not soldiers. Something worse. Memory scrubbers, neural resets, atmospheric dampeners that changed how humans felt about resistance, turned rage into confusion, turned fight into fog. It wouldn't hit like fire. It would come like a dream, and we'd never wake up. We had one shot. Griggs had access to a prototype beacon, something built decades ago, back when humans still had control of their own orbit. It could send a single pulse, not like the disruptor that fried Grid Nexus. This was sharper, targeted. It could embed a message into the very consciousness of a species. What kind of message? I asked. Griggs grinned, teeth yellow and ugly. Pain. We'd send it straight into the core hive relay of the incoming fleet, not to destroy it, but to remind it what we are, what we do when cornered, what we become when you try to tame us. But we had to launch it from orbit. And Earth's last free launch pad was buried under 70 feet of sand in what used to be Western Australia. Nadia didn't hesitate. I'll fly it. She didn't ask, didn't blink. She just decided. She wasn't military. She wasn't trained. She was human. That was enough. The desert was a bitch. Wind howled like something wounded, and the sand burned even at night. We traveled in an old crawler, Varelian chassis with human guts inside. Half the time, the auto-nav fought us, trying to steer us back to safe zones. I ended up ripping it out and driving by dead sun compasses and cracked maps. Nadia rode beside me, quiet, focused. You scared? I asked once, halfway through a sandstorm. No, she said, watching the dust spiral like a tornado outside the window. Liar. She finally looked at me. I'm terrified. That's why I'm going. The launch pad was buried, but Griggs had coordinates. Took us 5 hours of digging before we hit the top hatch. It hissed open like something waking from the grave. The smell of old oil and metal hit us like a memory. We descended into a tomb of forgotten defiance. Rust-colored walls, screens flickering with ghost data, and at the center, the launch system, primitive by Varelian standards, but still intact, human-made, unpredictable, dangerous, perfect. It took 12 hours to load the payload. Griggs worked with Katya, rerouting power lines and overriding the Varelian scramblers still sniffing for launch signals. The beacon, nicknamed God's Thorn, was a small cylinder, glowing faintly with dark red pulses. Inside it was a symphony of pain. Battle footage, dying screams, historical atrocities, memories of betrayal, Loss, vengeance, the worst of us, the part of humanity that never forgets. It was a warning wrapped in blood. "You sure this doesn't wipe out our own?" I asked. Griggs nodded. "It only sings to the Varelian frequency. Their kind of memory runs through harmony. This is disharmony. Raw, ugly, human." We strapped it into the pod. Nadia climbed into the pilot's seat, slipping on the visor with shaking hands. I leaned in, gripping her arm. "Come back." She smiled, tired, sharp, and sad. Not the point. The launch punched the sky open at dawn. Fire lit the horizon, sand curled back in screaming waves, and the ship tore through the clouds like a middle finger to the stars. We watched it vanish. Then we waited, and waited. An hour passed. Then the sky changed. It didn't explode. It didn't burn. It just stopped. Everything. Clouds froze mid-drift. Birds hung in the air like puppets with cut strings. Even the wind held its breath. Then the scream came. It wasn't from the ground. It came from space. Every Varelian ship, every drone, every echo of their tech across the planet started screaming. Not with sound, but with signal. Glitches. Static. Shrieks of corrupted harmony. The message had landed. God's thorn had been heard. And the aliens? They weren't gods. They were listening. Griggs didn't say a word. He just looked up, nodded once, and walked back inside to prep for retaliation. Because we knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The Varelians had a choice now. They could leave, cut their losses, or they could bring the hammer down. And knowing them, they'd bring the hammer. But now they knew something else. Earth bleeds. But it doesn't beg. 3 hours after launch, we picked up the signal. Nadia's voice, static-wrapped, weak, but there. Payload delivered, ship damaged, low orbit, no control. I grabbed the receiver, knuckles white. "Nadia, do you read? We're tracking you. We'll find a way to bring you down." A pause. Then her voice again, soft. "No time. Too many eyes. They'll follow." "You don't have to die," I snapped. She chuckled. "I'm already gone, Connor." My throat closed up. "You sent the message. You gave them hell." Another pause. "No, Connor. You gave them hell. I just lit the match." Then silence. The pod detonated above the Pacific. No debris, no trace, just a streak of smoke trailing across the sky like a dying comet. That night, the world lit up. Resistance cells across the globe, places we hadn't even contacted, rose up. Cities overran orbital centers. Drones were grounded. Surveillance towers sabotaged. Something had shifted. Not just power. Fear. For the first time, the Varelians feared us. They realized we weren't a project. We were a problem. One they couldn't predict, couldn't leash, couldn't tame. The Judgment Fleet turned, didn't land, didn't retaliate. They pulled back. Not in defeat, but in calculation, because now they had to rewrite everything they thought they knew about humans. We weren't just angry monkeys with guns. We were chaos with memory, and chaos doesn't negotiate. I stood on a ridge the next morning, wind brushing through my hair, watching a group of kids run across an open field that had once been locked behind a Varelian re-education center. Frank was beside me, cast on one leg, bruises still fresh. "She saved the world," he said. "No," I replied, voice low. "She reminded it how to fight." He nodded slowly. Behind us, smoke still rose from burning outposts. The cleanup would take years, maybe generations. But it didn't matter, because for the first time in decades, Earth belonged to humans again. Not because someone gave it back, but because we took it. The galaxy will remember this day, not because we destroyed them, but because we refused to be saved. The silence after the fleet withdrew didn't feel like relief. It felt like a storm holding its breath. And in that silence, something ugly began to crawl up from the cracks we thought we'd sealed. Frank and I were in New Colorado. Used to be Denver, before half the towers fell in the riots. Resistance banners still fluttered over crumbled statues. Kids ran barefoot through fields that used to be policed by floating drones. It looked like peace. But every man who's seen combat knows, peace isn't the absence of gunfire. It's the buildup. Katya was the one who spotted the first signs. We were patching a transmitter near an old Varelian depot, trying to bring the last of the blackout zones back online when she heard something over the shortwave. A call. Looping. Coded. HSS rising. Orders remain. Long live the Shepherd Protocol. I frowned. That's not Varelian. She looked at me, pale. No, it's ours. The Shepherd Protocol, the last-ditch security override installed by the unified human governance during the integration period, a quiet, backdoor failsafe in case contact with the Varelians failed and Earth collapsed. It was designed to re-establish control, but not for the people, for the collaborators. We tracked the broadcast to what used to be a terraforming lab out in Oregon. Mostly buried now, covered by ash and moss, and memories no one wanted. Inside was a group of 40 armed men, former peacekeepers, those loyal to the old Earth assembly that sold us out for Varelian tech and safe jobs in glass towers. Their leader, a man named Calder. And I knew that name. He was on the emergency committee that first proposed the Civic Adjustment Index, the program that decided which humans were compatible with Varelian society. The rest were labeled unstable elements, a fancy way of saying non-compliant trash. He saw us enter and smiled like we were high school kids caught sneaking into a theater. I expected someone sooner, he said. You resistance types are usually so loud. Frank stepped forward, limping on his bad leg. You're 2 weeks late to the surrender party. Calder didn't even flinch. Oh, we didn't surrender. We adapted. He motioned to the wall behind him. Huge screens flickered to life. Varelian data streams, half decoded, hijacked. They'd taken the alien framework and grafted it into human systems. You're trying to rebuild it, I said slowly. The whole leash. The whole damn cage. No, Calder said. We're improving it. Without them, Earth will collapse. You've seen the food riots, the medical shortages. Power grids are failing, but we can fix it. Not as slaves, as rulers. That was the moment I knew this war wasn't over. It had just changed uniforms. We tried diplomacy first. Griggs even sent a council rep out there, some clean-cut type who used to work in interstellar law. 3 hours later, we got a box shipped back with his jawbone inside. Message received. Calder and his new Shepherd State Syndicate, HSS, weren't looking to negotiate. They wanted to rebuild Earth their way. No aliens, no resistance, just top-down authority, full surveillance, emotional control programs recycled from Varelian experiments, and a new loyalty index to keep everyone else in line. Frank was furious. We fought to get rid of overlords, not to make new ones. But the worst part? People were joining. Not everyone wanted to think for themselves. Freedom is heavy. It's easier to follow rules than to make hard choices. Calder promised order. He promised food, electricity, protection. And in places where the power hadn't come back on, that sounded like salvation. We needed a win. Fast. Griggs said there was one last active Varelian satellite still circling. Old, disconnected, mostly silent, but packed with backup data. Information on the Shepherd Protocol, encrypted Varelian files, and maybe even footage proving who sold out humanity in the first place. It was drifting over the North Arctic expanse, one of the dead zones where weather and magnetic interference made flying nearly impossible. We'd need a crew, a ship, and a death wish. I knew just the guy. His name was Boone, used to run black market orbital hauls during the integration era. Smuggled tech, refugees, anything that pissed off the aliens. Lost an eye in a decompression accident and had it replaced with a cracked lens he refused to upgrade. "Looks like hell," I said when I found him half buried in vodka at a Greenland bar. He grunted. "Hell pays. Freedom doesn't." I dropped a data slate in front of him. He scrolled through the satellite specs, then looked at me with one eye that never blinked. "You're insane." "Yeah," I said. "But you're coming." We launched from an abandoned cargo hub outside Anchorage. Boone's ship was barely holding together, half-welded panels, mismatched engines, control systems held together with copper wire and spite. We called her the Hollow Crown. Boone grinned. "She leaks oxygen and shakes like a fever dream, but she flies." Nadia would have loved this wreck. That thought hit me hard as we broke atmosphere, watching the Earth fade below. We reached the satellite 6 hours later. It drifted like a tomb. No lights, no defenses, just dead silence. Boone kept the engines hot while I spacewalked across the hull, magnetic boots clanking with every step. I felt the void behind me like a hand on my neck. I cracked the seal and crawled inside. The smell hit me first. Not rot, not decay. Memory, screens still flickered inside, logs, records, transmissions, everything. I downloaded it all. Took 2 minutes. But I didn't leave right away. I stared at one log in particular, an image file. It showed the first Varelian delegation, and standing beside them, smiling wide, hand outstretched, Calder. He'd been in bed with them since day one. We broadcast the footage across every resistance frequency, over old TVs, pirate radio, repurposed billboards, anywhere we could reach. It hit like a bomb. People saw the truth. Calder hadn't adapted. He'd been bred for it. His new order was just the same leash, painted in human colors. The next day, 17 of his key outposts were overrun by locals. Soldiers defected. Civilians rose. It wasn't just our war anymore. It was everyone's. Calder responded the only way tyrants do when exposed. He launched a counterattack. And this time, it wasn't surgical. It was butchery. The Battle of New Colorado broke out 2 days later. Thousands dead, burned-out buildings, streets littered with bodies. It was the ugliest fight since the fall of the grid. But we held. We broke them. Not with tech, not with strategy, with fire, with stubbornness, with the kind of rage you only earn when you've been lied to your whole life. Calder escaped. But his empire? Cracked. His voice faded. And Earth? Started breathing again. Not all at once, but enough. We burned his banners, tore down his signal towers, and then we waited for the next threat. Because it's never over. The aliens may come back, another tyrant may rise, but this time Earth's awake. This time, we're not waiting to be saved. We're not hoping for peace. We're preparing for war, the kind that doesn't end in surrender. The kind that ends with no leash left to clip. 3 weeks after the Battle of New Colorado, the air still smelled like scorched metal and guilt. We buried the bodies behind a shattered church that used to be a peace center during the integration era. The irony didn't help. Frank stood beside me, limping worse than usual, one arm still in a sling. He didn't say much, none of us did. What do you say when victory cost you everything except your soul? Griggs held a makeshift meeting 2 nights later in the wreckage of the old Denver Municipal Building. Just a table, some folding chairs, and too many eyes that had seen too much. No uniforms, no flags, just survivors. There were voices from every major resistance cell: South African rebels, Siberian rogue squads, urban scavengers from Tokyo, farmers from Argentina who'd been building their own militia out of tractor engines and homemade weapons. It wasn't global leadership. It was the only thing left. I didn't want to be there. But Frank told me something I couldn't ignore. People don't just need to fight, they need something to fight for. And somehow, that meant me. Griggs started off simple. The war's changed. The Varelians haven't hit back yet, but that doesn't mean they're gone. We've burned the leash, sure. But what comes next? If we don't organize now, someone else will. And it won't be people like us. He looked around the table, eyes sharp. We can't afford another Calder. A few grunted in agreement. One guy, big, balding, ex-con from what used to be Louisiana, leaned forward. You want a new government? No, I cut in, surprising myself. I looked around the room. We don't need rulers, we need defenders. Earth isn't ready for politics. It's still bleeding. But what we can do is build something that protects what's left. A line in the sand. Not control, accountability. A woman from what used to be Egypt, tough voice, deep scars on her hands, nodded slowly. You want a shield, not a crown. Exactly, I said. A shield that answers to the people. Decentralized, hard to infiltrate, built from dirt and blood, not handshakes and PR. We all knew what I was really talking about. The Sentinel Network. It started as a whisper back when the first cities fell, an idea more than a plan. Keep your zone clean. Watch the sky. Protect your own. But now? Now it had to be real. We set up HQ in the Black Hills, old territory, deep cave systems, low satellite exposure, the kind of place no one looked anymore. We ran everything by hand, shortwave comms, human couriers, encryption done on paper. Trust wasn't digital now. It was face-to-face and earned through scars. Our first mission wasn't about fighting. It was about clearing the rot. You see, Calder's HSS might have fallen, but the infection he left behind didn't die easy. All over the world, splinter cells popped up. Tiny cults of order. Worshippers of structure. Some wore masks. Some quoted alien doctrine with human tweaks. Some claimed Calder would return like a messiah. It was pathetic and dangerous. The first nest we found was in the ruins of Prague. Called themselves the Pure Cycle. Said the Varelians had been misunderstood. That peace through control wasn't slavery. It was evolution. They were kidnapping orphans. Hooking them into makeshift neural interfaces built from broken alien tech, trying to harmonize them into better humans. The kids didn't scream anymore. That was worse than screaming. We stormed the place with 8 sentinels, breach charges, no speeches, no warnings. We burned it to ash. One of the kids, a girl named Lina, maybe 12, didn't speak for the first 5 days after we pulled her out. When she did, all she said was, "They wanted us to forget who we were." We didn't let her. Meanwhile, the Varelians still loomed. Not physically. They weren't dropping bombs. But they were watching. Always watching. Griggs said the withdrawal wasn't fear. It was recalibration. They've never seen a species like us, he explained. We're inconsistent, disorganized. But we don't collapse. They're trying to figure out the math on how to beat something that doesn't add up. We'd intercepted a few stray alien transmissions by then. Cracked enough Varelian code to understand one chilling phrase that kept repeating. Conscious anomaly persists. They were talking about Earth, About us. About what happens when a planet refuses harmony. And then came the bombshell, a transmission out of what used to be Nevada. Encrypted human code buried beneath static. It took us 3 days to decode. When we did, we stared at the screen for 10 minutes straight. It was Nadia's voice. Fragmented, barely intact, but her. Not dead. Orbiting drift. Pod intercepted. Humans. Modified. Others survived. Earth must know. They're coming. But not Varelians. Worse. The file ended in corrupted data. Boone punched the wall hard enough to bloody his knuckles. Hell, he muttered. She's alive. Griggs nodded. And she just warned us. Here's the thing no one wanted to admit. The Varelians weren't the top of the food chain. They were middle managers, enforcers of a bigger empire, and whatever they answered to, whatever Nadia saw out there, was still on its way. We didn't even know what it was. We just knew one thing. It wasn't coming to protect Earth. It was coming to finish the job. That night, I stood out under the stars. Frank joined me, sipping bad whiskey from a dented canteen. You ever think about walking away? He asked. Every damn day. Why don't you? I looked up at the sky, not with fear, not even with anger, with defiance. Because no one else is going to stand between what's up there and what's left down here. He nodded. Then he handed me a piece of cloth. Tattered, burned, faded red with a crude symbol scrawled in black ink. It was the first Sentinel patch. Put it on, he said. You're not a survivor anymore. You're a protector now. It started with a signal. Not Varelian this time, worse. A deep band pulse we intercepted from high-orbit debris, a data fragment laced with compression algorithms beyond anything the Varelians ever used. It wasn't in a language, not even in binary. It was a pattern. One meant to bypass translation and crawl into the nervous system. We called it the howl. First guy who tried decoding it started bleeding from the nose in under 2 minutes. Second guy passed out cold. Third had seizures before we even knew he was hearing it. It wasn't communication. It was conditioning. Designed to prep a species for acceptance. Griggs was the one who said it out loud. This is the curtain raiser. What's coming next won't ask. It'll reformat. Nadia's last message had given us coordinates, starfield alignment, likely the last position of her damaged pod before it dropped out of Varelian tracking range. Somewhere near the edge of the Kuiper Belt. Boone, still furious, still bleeding into his gloves every time he punched something, was the first to volunteer. We're going out there, he said. If she's alive, we bring her home. And if she's not? Frank asked. Then we find what took her, Boone growled, and we kill it. We spent 4 days building the vessel. This wasn't a scout trip. It was war prep. A slow, silent crawl across the void. We modded the hollow crown with scavenged alien stealth tech, compressed human cryopods, and an experimental fusion drive Griggs's team barely understood. Boone named her the Red Echo. Fitting. Because whatever we found out there, it was echoing back to Earth already. And it wasn't whispering. It was screaming. There were 5 of us on the ship. Boone, myself, Katya, now our tech lead, ruthless with code, colder with people. A young engineer named Rami, barely 20, who'd built drones for the resistance during the food blockade. And a woman named Ellen, ex-scout for a rogue military splinter that refused integration during the first Varelian landing. She didn't talk much, but she never missed a shot. We launched at 0400, no ceremony, Just dirt, fire, and metal dragging itself out of Earth's grip. I watched the planet get smaller behind us and wondered if we'd ever see it again. The journey out took 3 weeks in suspended stasis. Cold, empty, dreamless. When we woke, Katya had to shake frost off the data console with her bare hands. Boone's breath came in clouds, and Rami was puking into a bag within 5 minutes. I strapped in and looked at the nav. There it was. Dead center. A faint metallic blip spinning on a slow trajectory through nothingness. Nadia's pod. We approached slow, silent, every inch of the hull wrapped in signal-canceling foam. But we weren't alone. They looked like asteroids at first, black rock formations drifting near the pod, but they moved in patterns, geometric, deliberate. Katya scanned them, and her voice dropped 2 octaves. "Those aren't ships," she said. "They're living." The scanners picked up biosignatures laced with artificial code. Not machines, not life. Hybrids, grown for deep space. Mindless, maybe, or worse, linked to something else. Boone narrowed his one good eye. "If they touch the ship, we burn 'em." "Not yet," I said. "They haven't attacked." Rami's fingers flew across the screen. "I think they're scanning her, not us." We edged closer. The pod came into view, charred, cracked, but intact. And inside, movement. Ellen was the first to step into the recovery suit. She latched onto the airlock, crossed the void like a shadow, and opened the pod. We watched from the deck, tension snapping like wires in our spines. And then, a body floated out, curled, gaunt, but alive. Nadia, barely breathing, but her eyes opened just before the seal locked. And the first thing she said, whispered, cracked, was, "You found me. Before they did." We got her stable. IVs, warmth, nutrient drips. She didn't say much for the first few hours. Then she looked at me, dead in the eye, and said something I'll never forget. "They're not conquerors. They're collectors." I frowned. What does that mean? They don't want control. Not like the Varelians. They want preservation. They want our essence. You mean culture? No, she said slowly, voice trembling. They want what makes us human, our fear, our rage, our chaos. They want to study it, break it down, and wear it. Boone stared at her like she was speaking a different language. You saying we're trophies? Worse, Nadia said. We're resources. They refine emotion like fuel, convert it into psychic resonance and feed it into their hive structures. Pain, passion, memory, that's what they came for. Rami turned pale. We're not just prey, we're harvest. The black asteroid thing started moving soon after. No sound, no warning. They just drifted closer and opened. Petals of obsidian unfurled like the mouth of a silent god. And from the center? Light. But it wasn't warm. It was the color of forgetting. Nadia screamed. We didn't ask questions. We fired. The red echo shook with the force of 3 plasma torpedoes slamming into the nearest hybrid. It buckled, twisted, and screamed. Not through speakers, through our heads, like it didn't care about flesh. Only memory. The second one darted forward, fast enough to blur. Boone took the helm and juked us left, scraping the belly of the ship against a frozen corpse of a long-dead satellite. The third latched on. Spikes drove into the hull. The lights dimmed. Ellen grabbed her rifle and went outside. No words, no plan, just grit and vengeance. We watched through the exterior cams. She floated up to the creature's surface, aimed and fired 3 concentrated antimatter rounds directly into its core. It collapsed inward, hissing like a dying animal, then exploded outward in a burst of stardust and black oil. Ellen didn't flinch. She drifted back in, breathing hard, visor cracked, but alive. We didn't wait around. We downloaded every last byte from Nadia's pod. Navigation data, scans, logs. Everything pointed to one thing. There was a structure at the edge of the system, invisible to standard scans. A nest, maybe a gate, or worse, a harvesting point. Katya ran the trajectory through 4 different models. "It's not stationary," she said. "It's moving." "Toward Earth?" I asked. She nodded once. "Yes." Nadia looked at us, tired, pale, but eyes burning. "We have to go back. Tell them. Warn the Sentinels. The Varelians weren't the worst." She paused. "They were just the first ones that smiled." We turned the Red Echo toward Earth, burned every fuel line we had, rerouted every cooling system to buy more speed. Boone slammed his fist on the dashboard. "We brought her back," he said, voice hollow. "But we also brought a storm." The Red Echo slammed back through Earth's upper atmosphere like a burning sword. Boone nearly tore the console apart, keeping it steady. We came down over the Atlantic, stealth field glitching, engines sparking. Didn't matter. We had what we came for. Nadia was strapped down, weak but conscious, whispering the same word over and over. Breacher. That was their name. The things past the Varelians. The ones who consumed species from the inside, broke their identities apart like puzzle pieces and sold them as blueprints to the hive. Cultures, feelings, instincts, all reduced to echo data. We hit ocean hard, then blacked out. I woke up 2 days later in a triage tent in what's left of Montana. Sentinel Command had relocated there. Deep forests, difficult terrain, and too remote for Varelian influence. I could barely see through one swollen eye. Boone was wrapped in 3 layers of bandages. Ellen's arm was gone from the elbow down, cauterized clean. Katya? She didn't make it. She stayed behind when the power core started melting down mid-entry, rerouted the signal so we wouldn't lose the data we stole. One last middle finger to the void. Her name went up on the wall of fire the next day. That's what we called it. A steel wall welded from alien scrap, etched with the names of every human who gave everything after the leash snapped. A wall for the ones who bled after the world was supposedly saved. That wall was getting too full. Nadia's intel made everything terrifyingly clear. The breacher structure, not a ship, but something more like a wound in space, was drawing closer, hidden behind blind zones created by Varelian tech. And it wasn't alone. Dozens of these things moved through systems like viruses, jumping between stars, feeding on conscious life forms that showed emotional density. We weren't just on their list. We were now their primary source. Why? Because we had something most species lose after integration. Defiance. We didn't break. And that made our signal pure, raw, and dangerously potent. To them, that made us valuable. To us, that made them a target. Griggs, older than ever but still holding steady, gathered what was left of global leadership in the Black Hills. This wasn't politics anymore. This was species survival. "We're not going to sit and pray," he said. "We're not going to bury cities under another occupation. If they want emotion, if they want fear and rage and fire..." He paused, smiling grimly. "Let's give them everything." The Sentinels called the counterstrike Operation Emberlane. A message. A trap. We would broadcast a falsified distress signal, a perfect loop of fear and desperation, mimicking an entire continent in collapse, a beacon for breachers to descend on, and while they swarmed the source, we'd send in the nail, a custom-built payload, containing not nuclear warheads, not EMPs, but something worse, a raw feed of human violence, all of it, every battle, every atrocity, every rebellion, from the trenches of World War I to the back alleys of New Colorado, digitized, amplified, saturated, a scream they couldn't digest, because if they fed on emotion, we'd feed them the poison we've lived through. Frank stood next to me as we watched the final build of the nail being loaded into a long-range stealth carrier. "I don't like it," he said. "It's suicidal," I answered. "Exactly." He paused. "So who's flying it?" I turned to him. "I am." No one argued. They knew I'd seen it all. Fought in the streets, watched friends die for freedom we barely understood. I'd earned the right to be the one who pulled the pin. Boone tried to fight it. "You don't owe anyone that." But I did. Not because I wanted to die, because I couldn't live knowing someone else had to. The flight out was quiet. No music, no comms, just the stars and my thoughts. The carrier coasted toward the edge of the system, aimed right at the incoming breacher gateway. The false signal had worked. The hive structure was pulsing now, dozens of black tendrils flickering in and out of dimensions we couldn't even measure. They looked like massive floating spider lilies, each petal a frequency. They weren't creatures. They were concepts, ideas wrapped in physical code. And they were opening. The nail's core was armed. Timer set. 5 minutes. I recorded one final message. Not for the world, for the stars. You came to harvest us. You thought we were just emotion you could mine, that our fear made us weak. But you didn't understand what fear creates. It creates resolve, fury, brotherhood, defiance. You want to remember us? Then remember this. We don't go quietly. We burn. Then I launched it. I ejected into deep vacuum, drifting backward, watching as the carrier screamed into the breacher's open maw. And then, the light, not fire, not sound, just pure emotion, digitized, weaponized, unleashed. The breacher screamed. For real this time, not through minds or signals, but with sound that echoed through space itself. And then it folded in on itself like a dying god. The tendrils curled, flailed, then collapsed into a singularity of shattered thought. The rest? Ran, vanished between stars, gone. The fallout reached Earth 27 hours later. Not radiation, not debris, but a pulse. It knocked out half the surviving alien tech, disabled remaining drones, purged orbit of Virelian leftovers. But it did something else too. It cut the breacher signal, for good. Earth was dark to them now. Silent, invisible. We weren't a harvest anymore. We were a warning. I floated for 3 more hours before the pickup crew found me. Frozen fingers, no oxygen, but alive. Frank hugged me when I landed, tears in his eyes. "You stubborn son of a bitch." Boone just grunted. "Next round's on you." Nadia placed her hand on my chest and said, "They'll tell this story in galaxies that never knew fear." I looked at her. "No," I said. "They'll tell it because they know what happens when they try to bring a leash to Earth." Now, we're rebuilding, not just cities, but ourselves. Sentinel bases stretch across continents now, built not to govern but to watch the skies, ready, armed, free, and every child born from this point forward learns the same truth. You don't beg to be saved. You stand You fight, you burn if you must, because sometimes the only way to protect your world is to make the stars afraid of it.